Ladies and gentlemen, Unification Headquarters, Unification Party, Jason Rowe here with our co-host Adrian Blizzard. Over the last few weeks, have been a bit of a Donnie Downer, and I mean, that's the nature of the world we live in. Adrian suggested for this week that we would do a white pill episode, and we're going to talk about what we should be happy about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a
Despite
variety of things with a positive lens.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, fire away, Adrian. Your idea. So bring us up to speed here.
Well, as per usual, I do kind of like focusing on a quick Canadian political update because I do pay attention to it. And there is some positive, I think, mild white pills to come out of this last week in Canadian politics. The big thing in Canada as of late, we just had our ruler, the King of England, come and give a throne speech, which is basically the opening of a new government, the House of Parliament, and so he came in and instead of just one of the officials kind of reading off the focus of the new government, the king read it off basically. So I don't know if you saw that, Jay, but the king was basically, you just read the speech and he was talking a lot of liberal talking
Well,
points more or less. And
I didn't watch the speech because I couldn't care less about that, but I did
right.
think it was funny that we, in our efforts to assert our sovereignty in the face of Trump, we bring our
Foreign ruler king over.
our foreign ruler king. So
Yeah, the
I thought
ethnically
that
German
was it.
English king of England, who is the ruler of Canada and the Commonwealth. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree
So
with
I
you.
mean, that was all kind of ridiculous, and I kind of left at that because I was like, who cares?
Well, that my white pill takeaway from it is I think even before people were asleep at the wheel on most things in life, I think most people think politics is boring because politics is boring. And I think the fact that it was such a meh, and if you did kind of look at it, it was kind of, I think it might have just woke a few people up being like, wait a second here, to exactly your point. Now, they might not, whatever, do anything about it actually, because what are you going to do? What are we, serfs or subjects? We're subjects. We're subjects of the king. So I mean, it is what it is. But I think it to your point's bang on. It doesn't bode well from the perspective of like a population that was like, wait a second, I thought we were we're proud to not be American, but I guess we're stoked that we're kind of English or something. So whatever. It wasn't nothing, and I think that just goes to show how, in my opinion, the monarchy is kind of, from a Canadian perspective, outlived its usefulness. Like I don't even know what it did before. Maybe it was kind of your diplomacy guy before, but I'm not a big fan of the monarchy. So I kind of think it didn't do them any favors coming here. Anybody that liked it probably still likes them and liked it, and anybody that didn't care, I think leans more likely to not liking them than liking them. That's just my hunch. What do I know? There was a
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, your blanket statement is probably correct generally, but I would say it would probably be more of an age thing. I think the only people who care about the
or 70
Royals
plus.
probably are, yeah, or something like that.
And not even that. Like I remember back in the day, it was always the grandparents, but now my parents are grandparent ages, and they're kind of like they were. It was on their
Yeah,
radar.
because I think it was, I don't know, it's still modeled. It's funny. I remember when I used to be married in the olden days, I had a wife, and I went to the store one morning, and the front page of the news was like Princess Diana, dead or whatever. And I mean, I was into the royals, and what do I know about Princess Diana? Like, whatever. And so I came home, and we had a lovely day, and we were all going out and about and doing our thing and carrying on. And then it was maybe the next day or something, or later that night, and someone said to Jen about how Princess Diana had been killed earlier this morning. I was like, oh yeah, I read that in the paper. And then I remember her, like, she was devastated that I didn't pass that, and I was like dumbfounded that that would be a thing that you could get mad at somebody for, but
Well,
it's ridiculous. So apparently there were some younger-ish people who cared
I'll,
about at least Princess Diana, but
I'll
I
tell
was
you my.
oblivious to that.
I remember because like Princess Diana dying for me was kind of like a 9/11 moment where I remember exactly because we were lower middle class. Maybe I'm reaching even using the word middle, but like we used like I had rabbit ears for TV. So like for a week I couldn't watch The Simpsons on CBC, Like, I think I might have been like 8 or 9 years old. So it was a big deal to me because I was like, oh, the whole country's like shutting down for a week over this gal. Like, man, how am I going to watch The Simpsons? But I mean, exactly. Like, I just think it's an aging institution in a world that's getting like more individualized. It's just, like I said, I don't think it made him any friends that he didn't already have. Not that he did a bad job or anything like that. It just kind of shows the agedness of it. Similar to that with our parliament, like there was a couple funny Carney moments. One where he was like trying to what looked like trying to get some work done, and then like Melanie Jolie is like playing with a fidget spinner, and she tries to like saddle up to Carney, and Carney, you can see Carney is just like he just waves her off, and she saddles back over, and you're kind of like, okay, I'll take that. Like, yeah, maybe he's actually at least pretending, giving us the optics of he's going to do some work. But then, sure enough, come to question period today, which it was funny to see Andrew Scheer back at the helm, the former Pierre Poilievre, the former leader of the party who lost an election to Trudeau. Um, he was Carney got asked two questions, and like after the third question, which was about like um, overseas banking and stuff like that, Carney was gone. He left. He left after the second question in question period, which is just like, welcome to democracy, people. Elbows up. Like, like, yeah, we're a sovereign
Or
nation. And
he can't rule by diktat, so he's falling apart like a Chinese motorcycle.
I wouldn't even necessarily say he fell apart, but he ran away like a Chinese motorcycle when you stole it. Um, and one thing that I took away from that setting though that I saw like one of the positives was like you don't see any NDP because they got decimated. So it's just the two
Well, they've
teams.
lost their party status and their party, yeah, which is just, but we'll see what
Yeah,
happens with that.
exactly. We'll wait till they needed to make a deal, and then they'll let Charlie Angus speak or something. But the thing that I noticed that I think is interesting is both parties have quite a few new MPs, but the Liberals in particular have quite a high percentage. And I think it'll be a very interesting kabuki theater of question period going forward because you're going to have all these like literally like paper reading Liberal candidates just like reading what the phone would say. And then you're going to have like seasoned conservative people like Andrew Scheer. We got a former leader now just filling in for a minute. You got like Melissa Landsman. You got a couple new up and comings, but a lot of people on the conservative side are coming back more so than the Liberals. So I think it might just be baby town frolics and might make for some good sound clips in the near future, just on an optimistic
So
note.
your optimistic level is that the Canadian government is at such a level of buffoonery that we might have lots of things to talk about on the show. Or another way of looking at that is they'll be so busy keystone copping around policy, this, that, and the other thing, that us regular Canadians just living our lives will be maybe spared a short period of time to just be left alone.
Well, I think that's going to happen. Everyone's going to go back to sleep as per usual. That's the status quo. But I just think we're going to get a couple more of the Apple moments. You know what I mean?
Right
Like
on.
there's
Well,
that.
like, we can look forward to that. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see that for sure.
Yeah, I just thought that's basically all I got to say on Canadian politics. And I just think if I were to put a white pill on what happened this week, I can't. That's my perspective. And maybe you agree or disagree. Let me know in the comments where I'm right or wrong. Feel
Well,
free.
yeah. All right. So Canadian politics, good. We got that out of the way. So
Wrapped up.
white pill,
Gone.
white pill, the white pill. Um, when you suggested that we speak about this, I mean, I've thought about this type of thing before because as much as I seem like I tried to do a deep dive into it from a pessimistic perspective, like who's the scientist? But I mean, we don't have to get that clever. Like we all understand where pessimism comes from, and we all understand how we're motivated by fear versus, because positive is like we know the media manipulates by using fear, but we still seem to get caught up in it. So it is nice this white pill segment to like step back from that and
Activate a
and
part of your
then
brain.
remind, yeah, yeah, and so one of the things that I've thought about when you hear about like, oh, men this, that, and the system this, and oh, the men can't get jobs, and white men, like complaints like left, right, and center, and everybody's feeding on these things. But I tried to look at it from the opposite perspective. I guess if your imagination can only imagine, and your only thing that you could imagine for a man's life was that I will get married, find a respectable job that I will go to for 45 years, like if that's the best that you've got in your brain, then there is no white pill for you, because those days are gone for the most part, and they were only a brief blip
regardless of your skin color
historically. Regardless of your skin, it's
or your
all,
genitals. Yeah,
yeah, it's just that's, I mean, this is where
different
God,
world.
so I can talk about that perspective. But essentially, though, I was looking back historically, and I mean, it's easy to look back historically and go like, oh, well, obviously things were harder in the past. But um, I had the AI make like a top 10 list of like, what would you pick would be the top 10 like metrics to determine how good life is in general. And then it came up with 10. And then I said, do your best to make a chart of what all those metrics would be like in 1900, 1960, and 2020. And without exception with the exception of an increase in crime statistics as one of the measures. And the other measure was an increase in wealth inequity, was like, we're off the charts, like life expectancy, infant mortality, education, clean water, blah blah blah,
Ease
like
of travel. Yeah, yeah.
all of it, like we're beyond belief. So then I took that subsection. Okay, well, crime is up. I'm not going to argue that, and that's pretty obvious.
If
And
I may, with crime,
please,
we have the technology to investigate more crimes now, like old DNA. We have cameras. We also have like
yeah,
more
but I don't.
laws
I
on the
mean, yeah,
book,
for sure,
probably.
But that's just a matter of degrees. I'm going to concede the point because it's. I'm not even going to
Proofs.
bother. I'm going to concede the point. Is there more crime in 2020 than there was in 1900? Actually, I don't even care. It doesn't even matter. It's one of a million metrics. It's
I got
metric
you.
guy. So, but the one that I thought was interesting that they kept and like was really harping on it was the AI was harping on this like wealth inequity. So I went into this like conversation with Perplexity about, okay, I'm a subsistent farmer, right? And I've been lifted out of poverty, and there's like hundreds and thousands of me, like more than ever in history. Why do I care if Elon Musk has more money, but everybody that I know now has more than enough to eat and a warm place to sleep in, right? Like, wouldn't you say that, like, all those metrics, like, but we're complaining about, like, oh, there's billionaires and oligarchs and whatnot. But
Private
I
jets.
mean,
Where's my private
yeah,
jet? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so then it kept harping. I said, well, what's the difference? Like, and I explained my case to Perplexity. Perplexity said back more or less, well, wealth inequality is equated with, turmoil. And I mean, they're all weak answers. And basically it boiled down to is if you're a crybaby and you set your happiness dial on what is happening to others above you and around you, you will be disappointed no matter how great the world ever gets. And if you are the person who just all he does is take the slightest glance over his shoulder to the past, and you compare your life now to the past in any time,
You're immediately
it's a
happy and grateful.
you should be. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Sorry, one so that I would say, so to start my frame of the evening, I'm going to be coming at this from this sort of like comparison of the past and to the level of freedom that it's almost insane how much freedom an unafraid man has or a person has in the year 2025. And it's almost like it's not a white pill, it's a phosphorus glowing pill of the opportunity that we are being presented with it's almost unimaginable in comparison to like any other time in history. It doesn't matter who you are, race, exactly like you said before. Race, it doesn't matter. We're all playing a game and we all have obstacles. And the obstacles now for everybody is housing affordability. Like these are just, it's like we're playing the game of Monopoly and the rules have changed a bit and we need to find new strategies for sure. But that's not a black pill. That's in light of the things we're going to talk about. It's like I said, it's a glowing phosphorus pill. So I'm ready to dive in.
Well, that's a kind of a conclusion I would come to for years after having those conversations about like the cruel masters of the world and why are they being so greedy and all that. But then you realize you take like 5 minutes, look back in the history, let alone a couple of years, and you realize how much better things are, how much better things are for the average poor person anywhere in the world, let alone in the first world especially. And then you
No,
think to yourself,
everywhere.
like you were saying earlier, we're like we're conditioned for fear and not to really enjoy the reward, right? Like the same as finding $40 is comparable to losing $20 into like energy given. So like we're so conditioned to the negative, we're like, look how great things are, and we're still complaining. And then you got the phone where you can complain now than ever on multiple different platforms and maybe build an audience complaining. And heck, maybe we're doing that. But I just mean like there's a case to be made with when it comes to the powers that be, where it's just like, what do you want them to do? Like they could literally give us all a free car and we'd be complaining about paying for oil changes. And like, so
Well,
why don't we?
for sure. And the thing is, like, I mean, this is an easy way to make the example. I used to do renovations in Toronto, and Toronto was a city of wealth. And the neighborhoods that I was doing renovations in, they were neighborhoods of wealth. I can't even begin to tell you. I gave every single mother, every person I knew, every friend, relative, almost new washer, dryer, fridge, stove being thrown out of houses that we were doing basement renos on. They just wanted them gone. They didn't want to bother with marketplace, right? They didn't want $50. They
Yeah,
just wanted it out of the basement. And after a while, I had so many that I was like putting them by the road, curb alert, free. And they'd be like front load washer dryer combos, those red and blue ones, like I don't mean old white Maytags. And my point being is now here where we live in New Brunswick, you go on Marketplace and you pay retail for garbage because there's poverty out here. I remember I went down when I took my family, we lived in Panama. I tried to go like the equivalent of going and buying like used furniture. It doesn't exist. It filters through the system. Like there's nobody like, I don't want this table anymore because it's blue. Like, no, this person wants it, then that person. Like, the only thing that comes out the end of the system, there's no marketplace, there's no used this, everything's used up. And my point being is those billionaires and trillionaires and uber wealthy, they the ones who create all the expensive LASIK eye surgery technologies that's top dollar. And then 30 years later,
it's ten
children
bucks at the
in
corner.
Tanzania are getting like their eyes fixed at a phone booth, right?
Well,
So,
and they always say like the number one corollary between like living longer and being healthy is actually wealth in the area. Like even poor people in the rich neighborhood typically live longer and like have whatever. Like at least they live. That's at least a stat that they've actually proven for years. And exactly, it just goes to show by that byproduct, like that's kind of the framing where you just kind of got to shift the framing and
yeah,
it's really that simple. But I know it's that simple for me and you because we've thought long and hard about perspective and like how important it is, whereas like a lot of people haven't. And they're stuck in that rut. Maybe it's called depression, maybe it's whatever they say it is, but I think it really is just framing. Like I know there's been times where I've been down and I've had to take, you take some time away and you reflect and you're really emotional for whatever, but you just know it's not serving you and you can't, it's already happened, you get over it, and then you try because you want to be in a good place and you want to, like, whether that's your view of the world or your view of life, it doesn't serve you to like be envious of others. And you are right, like if the wealth inequality You do hear that though when they talk about the wealth transfer that happened with COVID, and it's kind of like back to like the 30s again, almost in levels of like shifting. But again, you're right. Like, I know I complain about the middle class going away, which this more or less is, but at the same time, like, I bet you how many adults in Africa have a cell phone with internet access? You know what I mean? Maybe not constantly on the phone, but probably every single one. You know what I mean? Like that's got to be quite the tool. You know, you can that little everyone's got for the Library of Alexandria in their pocket now, on in the planet. Regard, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I got to tell you a funny story. Long time ago, pre-internet, I was in New York City with a friend of mine. He wanted to go to the museum or something, and I'm not a nerd, so I didn't want to go to the museum. So I went to the Shishi coffee shop where a guy with a black turtleneck who was like 65 and handsome working in a coffee shop in Manhattan because it was so snooty, chain and ridiculous. And you sat at this communal table, and that's not the point. The point is, I had the Sunday New York Times, and I like reading the newspaper. I used to like reading the newspaper, and I was going to spend hours at this shishi place. Didn't care what it costs for my coffee and de chocolat or whatever. So I read the New York Times. But it was interesting in that New York Times article, there was an article in there, and it was referencing the New York Times that I was reading by saying that I can't remember the time frame, but it wasn't that long ago where a learned man who could actually read and write would have as much information in his possession, or could even have as much information as his possession as I had in my hands, which at the end of Sunday, which was the Sunday New York Times, mind you, it is big, that I would then throw in the garbage or someone would throw in the garbage. And he was just making that point of comparison about, and like you just said, like you have the libraries of Alexandria in
at your
your
fingertips
in your
in rural
fingertips. Yeah.
Botswana. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like if you can't somehow take the responsibility on yourself to use these tools that are available to you. And I even was going to make, here's my second point. I don't know whose turn it is to go for points, but I
I'm
was
hitting.
thinking that you've already won, my friend.
Sorry, I did
But
interrupt you.
yeah, no, but okay. So okay, here's an example, right? Okay, apparently in the Qin dynasty China, adult men were forbidden to cry in public. If they were caught, their beard and eyebrows would be shaved off as punishment, as tears were seen as a sign of weakness. So this is a 2-for-1 kill shot here. Not only in the past could you just have one dude like a king tell you what you're going to do, right, as a dude. So forget conscription, forget serfdom, being tied to the land, like forget any of that. Like this is just like some king doesn't like the fact that you may be a little emotional, and
You
you
lose
you
your
know
eyebrows.
you would receive real world punishment in a world where ostracization
Huge,
ultimately leads to
huge.
fatal, basically. And then also here's even the more, they say talk about like toxic masculinity, like you better not be crying in that king dynasty. So then, and then you just start layering these on, like Sunday restrictions, blue laws prohibited men from engaging in activities, like whether you were religious or not, it made no difference. There was not, like, I even grew up at summer camp, religious upbringing. Sundays, I couldn't even throw a ball with my dad in the field.
That's work.
Like, no, it's just, you could do nothing on Sunday. So these were, now again, we willfully chose to go to that camp, so no problem, right? Couldn't swim in hot 30-degree August on Sunday. Don't go in the water, ridiculous. But they had these blue laws. You couldn't gamble, you couldn't hunt, you couldn't sell certain goods. Stores, I mean, I remember in my lifetime you couldn't even shop on Sunday. These are all newer things, so it's not that
Always
long
been.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's what I'm
didn't.
saying. Like, it just keeps going back and back and back. So you look now, like we're free from like the whims of an aristocracy for the most part. Like at least one guy can't just say like, I don't like this, and now we can't do that. That's kind of cool. And then we also don't have like cry all you want in public. Like nobody cares anymore what you do. Like we are completely freed of all societal responsibilities, religious responsibilities. Like you couldn't go live in a small town in like 1880 and not go to church on Sunday. Like whether you believed or not, you went to church on Sunday. Like nobody do business with you. Nobody like, and there's a million examples all through history. I could name 100 of them. Then you look at like feminism. Like we used to have to like had to hold the door and do this and do that. Like nobody cares if you do any of that for women anymore. Nobody cares if you have a woman. If you were the creepy old bachelor back in the day, if you didn't have a wife and kids, like literally no one cares. There has never been a time in human history that a man, person, any human has been less fettered by anything. Like, can you imagine if you were in, like, let's say we were Indians and we were in some tribe? Like, do you think it would have been up to us if we wanted to participate in the protection of the tribe against a raiding
Lines
party?
today, Chief. Yeah. No,
I
you're
don't
not.
feel like it.
Yeah.
You're not.
We're tying
Yeah.
you to the tree or you're coming with
Yeah.
us. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So like, and then you're not like, I was going to be like, oh, you know what I'm going to do, man? I'm in, whatever
Be
time
a poet.
period in the past. I'm going to be that. And you know what? And my wife's going to do the working. And she's going to have, and we're going to share the child array. Like, this is all of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And like, so who cares you can't buy a house, easily? Or who cares you can't get the $100,000 a year job in the cubicle factory? Like you've got like you said, the Library of Alexandria in your pocket. You have the university's best professors lab, everything talk in your pocket. You have um, YouTube videos can show you how to do anything there is to possibly do in the world. Nobody even cares about education anymore. Before you couldn't even pretend to charge top dollar if you weren't some sort of PhD or this. Now it's results based. Nobody cares if you learned how to do SEO writing from YouTube videos and you crush at it and you get results and you're like you have 3 legs and no arms. Like nobody cares about anything. So you are now like set loose to like do whatever it is you want to do. And especially like we said in Toronto, like here all you have to do is live adjacent to wealth and success and you can just be like a funnel of its detritus and you can live off it. You don't even need to be like here's an example. I asked Perplexity and I said, how much money, wages, hours, output, GDP did it require in the 1900 to like feed yourself? And it was like 7%.
Okay.
Right. And so, no, it wasn't 9. It was, sorry, I made the mistake. It was like 40%. In 1900, 40% of people's income went to feeding themselves.
Yeah.
Even with our outrageous food prices, guess what it is on average now? 7, right?
Well, a
So
fun one is light. Like candles were super valuable back in the day.
yeah, I saw a candle doc. Yeah, insane.
Yeah. The amount of money people spent just keeping light around. It was just the resource of light was so, and it is. When your power goes out, you realize real quick, oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Candles don't do jack other than the romantic bit. But let's go back to that 40% to 7. 40
for food.
7
for food costs.
What is more important than the calories you need to maintain yourself?
Right.
And then look at that from a historical perspective. And then if you were to go back past 1900s, you would probably look at people's labor time and whatnot. It would probably start being 85%, 90% of their time was just enough calories to not even survive, like to survive shittily, get rickets and scurvy and have 2 of your family members die every winter. Like ridiculous. So then the only thing, now here's an argument against what I'm saying. In 1900s, the average person paid 20% of their income to where they lived. So now in modern times, we're paying 35% to 50%. So then you're going to go, whoa, that's way worse. But I go, wait a minute.
What are we living in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I asked in 1900 how much square footage would be dedicated to a single person and it was like 200. And then I go, now 2020, what is square footage per person is like 1,000. So we increased our
Expectations
footprint and expectation by 5 times, yet we've only increased the cost by
by
two and a
75%.
half.
Yeah.
No, 2.5 times, or however, maybe your math's
Or
right.
20 to 35. Isn't that
20%,
35? Yeah.
2 times would be 45, which is in the middle of the 35 to, yeah. So,
Exactly. Well worth the trade-off. Well worth the trade-off. Had we
yeah,
had we been looking forward, we would have happily done it.
or, or the option you and I have done, right? We're keeping the 300 square feet and paying the less than 20% of our income for the so-called downgraded existence, right? So it's a matter of perspective and expectation.
I have a fun fact similar to you that I heard today from Jordan Peterson podcast. He was talking to a fella about energy, and the average person nowadays in the first world, basically more or less has, and I think he took it from Bjorn Youngberg, who basically said like we essentially live the lifestyles of someone 200 years ago with 40 servants, just like the average person in the first world.
It's ridiculous.
Which it's that's what I've always, as a student who's of history, like, I've always liked history as a little kid, whatever. I've always said like it just helps. Like you realize later in life that it gives you perspective. You don't realize that as a young man. As a young person, you're like, ooh, wars and battles,
Cool stories, yeah.
yeah. But it does give you perspective. Like a fun hashtag I started years back on Twitter that I did nothing about was like Mongolian reparations for Eastern Europe, because that was like when people were getting canceled and stuff. And it's like history is just a bloodbath. If you really want to find it, it's there. But it's just a matter of where you draw the line in the sand that you start getting upset about things. But I personally think that energy right now is kind of more important than ever. But we also similarly, sure, we have like a deficit because we have all these new advancements that are coming out. We have all these new demands that are going to be beneficial. For exactly what we're talking about.
I'm gonna because this is very relevant to as I'm literally installing the electrical system. I'm gonna make 2 electrical points that also again optimism and again expectation, whatever. So I remember before looking at could you use a bike to power your something and charge your battery? And I don't remember. Don't check the math on this, but this is directionally true. And I think, as I remember it accurately, essentially, if you were like an Olympian and you spent like 8 hours on your bike a day, you could create like 11 cents worth of power, right? It's like ridiculous. Like it's like human power with the advent of real energy, like in fuel and hydroelectric and solar, like no matter what you use, like
if I may, fun fact I heard,
human power is terrible. Go ahead.
A barrel of oil is comparable to a guy in the field with a scythe, like working or whatever they use in the field, doing that for 3.5 years. In say 12-hour days, 3.5 years, that barrel of oil has that much energy in it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We have no grasping of it.
Exactly. Like we don't realize what
how spoiled
the amount of work. Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I'm just saying, even the cost of power, lights, this and that, like it's supposed to be amazing. I can put into my place for less than $30 a month worth of just generator time, right? Without getting a big elaborate system, just gas, just normal gas and a tiny generator.
Petrol, okay.
Fire up some batteries, and then I can use 12-volt wire to run all that I need, 6 lights and my iPad and my phone to charge. And I just need a USB, a 12-volt USB adapter, which is like $10 and like pennies to set up a system.
And that's off
grid.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. And my point being is, can I wash my clothes? No. Can I? But for pennies, I have solved my energy problem, and I can, like I said, I can watch every show in the world. I can record this podcast. I can talk to Perplexity. I can for nothing. Like I don't need a $30,000 solar system. I don't need to be hooked up to the grid with a minimum monthly payment of $120 because they bring the electricity to you or whatever. So if you're out there and you're watching this video and you have a dark cloud about you because you're not powerless, right? Powerless. There's a million things that you can do. But again, if your goal is and your only expectation is like, oh, if I can't get the 9 to 5 and get the like, bye, I got no hope for you, right? Like,
One being
but
said,
yeah, but go buy a sailboat. I bought a sailboat like a few years ago, $3,500 mint, all like tons of sails, everything in working condition. Boat was seaworthy to go. Like the only thing that would stop someone from taking that boat from Ontario's Great Lake to any place in the world was my lack of skill, no, not the boat's capabilities. It was
thank
thirty
God
five
you
hundred
didn't have it.
dollars,
Or who I might never have met you, but didn't you live at the pier? Like,
possibly.
how much did that run you? Because I think it
It
wasn't for
was
cost
cheap,
you
man.
left it, right? You left it for
No,
other reasons.
I left for other reasons, but everyone says boating is expensive, but boating is expensive if you boat. If you just float at the dock, like, here's the deal. For the same money that you can buy a shitty trailer, you can buy a boat that you can sleep on. And for the same money that you can put a shitty trailer in a trailer park, you can put a boat in a marina. Now picture both of those scenarios. You spend about the same amount of money. Now, if you have a house, that's an expensive hobby. If you have no house, that is like the cheapest life hack that there ever has been. The only thing that makes it terrible in Canada, whatever, is our climate. But we can spend 6 months in the States, so you can do a flipsy roosie if you wanted, do 6 months here, 6 months there. And you're living on a boat. And now picture this, right? So you have the trailer park or boat marina, and now you're in a bar and you're a broke guy and you don't make much money, but you
Hey,
don't
want to
have
go
any
to my
expenses.
boat?
Would you like to come to my boat or would you like to come to my trailer? I
Yeah,
mean, that answers itself. And if your boat is like rusty and kind of like eclectic and you're beachcombers, man, you're cool. You're the
you're a free
Rockford
spirit.
Files. Yeah, you're that guy from that other movie that lived on the boat.
I, I had heard people years ago, and like when they were talking about San Francisco being too expensive, that the whole harbor pretty much was packed with people. If it wasn't the rich people's boats, it was people living in their boats. It was like their hack to the rent that was going on there, and like that's the way you got to think, like outside the box. Now, I
Absolutely.
what'd you do in the wintertime? Were you still able to live in the
No,
Lake
no, I
Ontario?
didn't. No, you can. You can get a bubbler. There's some like
Okay,
docks. Like this is not the best solution for winter climates, but if you're in like anywhere in the
beats the
states, like this
streets.
is what beats the streets. I know a
Yeah,
guy there was living in Pickering Harbor. His name was Leonard for 11 years. He did it. I mean, he did it. I mean, I'm too much of a crybaby. I mean, but I would do that, like you said, as opposed to be on the streets.
yeah.
For me, it was an investigation of could I, this would be more, for me, it was going to be more of I think you could reasonably live comfortably in a Southern Ontario harbor for 8 months of the year. And then seven, six for sure, push to seven if they'll let you keep your boat in the water. But I remember Pickering Harbor would go like, if you were first in and last out, you could do April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So you could get a pretty much full 7 months. And then if you go someplace else, that's a cheap living arrangement. I mean, but there's even more like a lot of the maritime rules I found out, like they supersede like countries and, like
Hmm.
maritime law.
I'm a free man. I'm a free man on the
Yeah,
sea. Yeah.
absolutely. But that stuff's real. Like mooring balls, you could just throw a mooring ball off the coast. And if you start reading the stories of now, of course, anyone in the comments said, well, they're cracking down on that. And, they're cracking down on everything everywhere. But it's one of the last places. I mean, if you want to get into like looking up weird rules and coming up with a different way to do things, that's a good one. Boats are like a great one. Just
On
don't go anywhere.
on a white pill note, if they're cracking down on everything everywhere, and for sure they are in certain ways, but that's another thing on a white pill note. Like I think we get blinded by our phones and our social media, So things look turbulent, more so than ever. Ooh, rah, rah. Did you see that fight or that thing or that hill fall or that terrible event? When I think that, like, we're just super, everyone's glued to everything. So, like, the minute something terrible happens in Baltimore or in Botswana or in rural China, if it's online, it's going to be shared around and it's going to get the eyeballs. So, I don't know. I think things are more peaceful than ever. Like on a fun note, I
No, you don't
wanted
even
to,
have to think that. They are. Like,
yeah.
just, they are.
And even this week in particular, like I saw, like Israel and Gaza agreed to a ceasefire for 60 days, I believe. That's a step in the right direction. India and Pakistan, their kinetic wars at least on pause, and Russia and Ukraine are fighting over the terms of peace. So it's like, okay, in my mind, it's like, okay, we got this big ball of energy out, hopefully, with these major, and even the other one, like Canada, US, like we're not angry anymore.
They
Um,
don't seem to be.
well, there was like all these big relationships are kind of boiled up, and like they've all kind of, cooler heads seem to be prevailing in that direction.
Well, that is
Um,
a white pill, but the next level white pill of that is who cares, right? Because most of our lives don't happen overseas. They happen within our communities, within like 30 kilometers of us. And I guess you can be selfish and decide like, who cares, right? Who cares
well,
what's going on in the world? I mean, until it comes knocking at your door, I
that's human
suppose.
nature. You're right. Nobody does, other than like nerds like me who are interested in geopolitics.
I know,
I
but everyone is. It's not just nerds like you. I'm saying like you said something, I think it was earlier today. You credited a quote to somebody who said like, was it Lewis Black you were saying or somebody? I can't
yeah,
remember who
yeah.
it was. Yeah,
Everybody,
say
I
that.
always read that it's like we're dying and like the world's falling apart and coming to an end. And I go outside and the sun's shining, the birds are chirping, the kids are playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we
Um,
do live, like in Canada, we live in a primarily like, even with the rules and the laws, and then we hear about the ostriches being called and you can't collect rainwater in Arizona. Like,
Doctor Doctor Drew said he
whatever.
could take the ostriches at his farm. So like, who knows that ostrich situation?
It's not the point I'm making.
I know.
The point
Sorry.
I'm making is, yes, the point I'm making is the rules are for chumps and just go do what you want. And sometimes you
So you're
might
told
get caught.
otherwise.
Yeah, and who cares, right? And then these people got to fight on with their ostriches. And instead of being so mad about it, it's like funny, right? Like I'm going to build things at my house I wouldn't normally be able to build if the building inspector was always snooping around. But the building inspector isn't always snooping around. And if you live in it, well, and if you're out there complaining because you can't afford a house in a subdivision, then these are exactly you're going to be your life because it's in the subdivision. If you got your wish where you can't do anything you want, you can't go be a cowboy in your boat in the
But you
subdivision.
want your neighbor to do that. You know what I mean? You're that tightly confined. It's kind of like
Absolutely, yeah.
you want those
Nobody
rules
wants
there,
that. So
right?
you gotta think in different ways. Or even if you are living urbanly, it's like five people used to share a house. There's no shame in doing that. So like go do that. Like rent rooms out, get revenue, and don't cry about, oh well, I want to live by myself and blah blah blah. Well,
Well,
good
then you
for
don't
you,
want the
Prince
9 to 5
Charles.
city life. Which do you want? You want the 9 to 5 city
Yeah,
life?
yeah,
You can
go
have
pay.
that, but you got to work around it. Or, try
Yeah,
and find something online or with part-time
right.
income in a rural area where you can afford a little piece of something and make it your
Yeah,
own.
well, no, he's even more like I'm saying. I remember looking at to like again talking about Canada, the U.S. I would see like trailers, right, on like trailer parks. And I mean, like like religious trailer parks or recreational, whatever. But I saw one. I will not disclose where it was, but at a religious affiliated camp that I grew up with. And I looked. I'm not talking like 20 years ago. I looked like 2 years ago, and there was for $6,500 a nice little tree lot, 2 roads back from the lake, right, in a religious campground. But nobody's going to bother you there. You have to do your own thing or whatever. $6,500. It would cost you. I checked up the costs of the year. So for your utilities, your taxes, your this and that, the use of all the facility, the lakes and kayaking and this and that. Okay, so put that aside. Now that then I looked at a similarly religious affiliated campgrounds in like I think it was in the Carolinas. I can't remember if it was north or south, but it doesn't matter. And I found a really nice trailer there. Like I'm talking like 36 feet. They've got a deck, a screened-in part. They've got a shed. They're both older trailers, but very lovely to live in. And one was $12,500. The other was $6,500. So essentially, if you had $20,000 in capital and bought both of these places in Toronto or in Ontario and the United States, and as a Canadian citizen, you could live 6 months here and 6 months there, including all utilities, taxes, insurance, everything you would need to, like, other than your internet, to survive. It would cost you about $500 a month. I'm not going to break down all of it, but these numbers are correct.
Say it
Five
with
hundred
me, Jay.
dollars a month. Yeah.
I got a little place in the Carolinas. Say it with me, Jay. I got a little place in the Carolinas. That could be you.
No, no, well, yeah. I'm not trying to sell nothing. I'm
No, but
just
you got to think
saying.
outside the box.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
but would that not be like? Is there not, like, your dad, other kinds of people? They have sometimes, they'll be crying poor when they have 200,000, 300,000. I'm saying there's solutions for people with 30,000, 20,000, $15,000 and a can-do attitude.
Well, that's the key. And I think that's the big takeaway too, is like with all the comings and going on, like you mentioned, like at the beginning, the wealth inequality, it really does come down to the individual. Like there's two types of people. People want to be told what to do and people want to tell people what to do. So if you want to be left alone, you can do that. And there's never been a better time in the world to do that.
There's never been a better time. You just do what you want.
And if you want to stand in line and wait for your government potato, there's also never been a better time to do that. So you can go do that.
So yeah, but there's the only thing we shouldn't be doing is complaining. Now I get it, not everybody is full of agency and they don't have the ability, but there is a solution. But the problem is people want the whole thing, and they don't want to they don't want to do what you got to do. And there's a never-ending number of alternative solutions that don't even involve yicky van life. I mean, maybe that's cool, but to me it sounds
Well, no, but there's the
terrible.
basement, and then there's the middle ground. You can keep moving it up. There's levels for sure. On a similar note, of good news and like living near rich people is good, and like it's not things don't always have to be the same. One thing I wanted to bring up today was completely out of our wheelhouse, but a great white pill is CRISPR advancements. Are you familiar
Ooh,
with CRISPR, like
I
gene
know what
editing?
CRISPR is. Gene editing, yeah, for nerdy new kids with.
It gets a bad rap. But there's a good story that's been going around this month about this young baby that had this very rare liver, like disform. I don't want to say. I don't mind. I'm going to use. Basically, it had a really rare
Sick baby.
abnormality
Yeah.
with its liver. It was like, according to the CBC here, 1 in 350 million. Right. So it's obviously one of those when it's the numbers are that low. Big health doesn't really come up with advancements specifically. So with this new technology, which could, I mean, people have heard things about it because I mean, I think it kind of first came on the radar for a lot of people when the Chinese government like had two twins that they made that were supposedly HIV resistant. So this chart here kind of shows a variety of fields that it'll be applied in, like other than just saving beautiful young babies, but like it's going to be in the medical field, agriculture, different research, but more or less you're able to modify the DNA. So if you have like a DNA that's like off, like they can target it. Like last month we heard the story about they made that dire wolf. Now that kind of sounded like funny meets Jurassic Park, like who cares? But I do think there's a lot more white pills. Couple advantages. You can target specific DNAs. You got different variants. It's fast and cost effective. Now, this isn't white pilly, but this chart here does show some disadvantages, which kind of are similar. Like when China said like those two babies are HIV resistant, you just can't help but assume like what else maybe did they do with that, right? Like, do I trust the Chinese Communist Party to have just done that one thing? Like, why I wouldn't throw it past them, but I do think for all the negatives, like the ethical issues, it doesn't always work. Unpredictable DNA repair cells, like I think there's more good than bad in my mind that could come from this. Like, obviously,
Wouldn't it be too soon to tell?
well,
Could
on
three
that note,
could CRISPR gene edits in 3 generations make everybody infertile or a psychopath or a sociopath?
that is definitely in the realm of reason. And like there is like a big movement right now. I know we're white pilling at this up, but there is a big movement I saw at the end of my little research into the CRISPR of like some famous gene scientists actually coming out and asking for a 10-year moratorium and like a pause. But I think the issue with something like a broad stroke remedy like that would be it would kind of more or less just like set the nation that does that at a disadvantage because like not everybody's going to play ball, right? So
Well,
it's kind of one of those things where you better get good at it. Like you might as well get good at it instead of just avoid it. But I mean, I don't know, maybe the baby story is a plant, but like if they can
no,
start like modifying you know, DNA at that early of the life cycle for us when they target specific things, like not just like, oh, can I get them in blue hair? I mean blue eyes and blonde hair, like not like that. But like I think that's good news. Like, and that goes back to like you were saying earlier, where when there's a lot of rich people around, they put their money into like cool stuff because they want to live
absolutely.
longer. So
Yeah.
like they're maybe we're gonna live longer by proxy.
Well, that's exactly what happens. And you think as much as we like to like slag these wealthy guys, there's a long history of like, you got like, have you ever heard of the Carnegie,
Yes, Andrew
like the
Carnegie.
libraries? Yeah,
Yeah,
no, but
he
the
built a library
libraries, you built
for
libraries
yeah,
everywhere. And
yeah.
all these old industrialists and barons were, I mean,
They weren't angels, but
you can be cynical about it. Yeah, but you can be, or maybe, to get public opinion, or who cares what the motives were? And we don't care like Elon Musk, oh, he's whatever, but
we know what
he's
their
still
motive was to make
flying
money.
things into space.
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever. So, but the thing is that it trickles down to us. Like
100%.
we get the benefits of like, we wouldn't be drinking our Tang if somebody hadn't gone to space.
Thank you
Right.
for the Operation Paperclip. Those Germans and their Tang were much appreciated. Yeah, no, exactly. Like that's the thing. Like
Game changer.
it's so easy to be positive or negative about anything, right? And I think rich people do get a bad rap. They're easy to hate on these days. Like you see all the love for that Luigi Mangione and like all the like and I you see it with in Canada, you see it with Galen Weston getting dragged in front of Parliament for price gouging on cabbage.
Yeah, but don't you
And
think like, I mean, they get what they get what's coming to them too, Like there's cosmic balance, I'm pretty sure, because like I think like, okay, you go like King Charles, he's the king of whatever, right? And then I saw him, and I see these people all the time, like these dignitaries, these people we so-called, we be jealous of because they made this much money and whatever. But you think it doesn't cost nothing to, like, can you imagine what would be worse? Like I saw King Charles sitting there at a function, and then you see a bunch of kids from the North dance, and then you see a bunch of like French kids recite something, and then you
talk
see a
about no
bunch of
freedom. He's stuck.
yeah,
He can't go
brutal.
outside.
I couldn't even watch the clip. Like it was so boring. I was enraged watching the clip of him being in there, and he was in there for 3 hours or two. Whatever. 15 minutes would be too much. It'd be like no oxygen. So, and then you see other people here. Like you can't envy anyone's life, like because you don't know.
And it
And
doesn't serve you in any way.
no, well, yeah, it does you no good. And again, this game is largely a game of perspective. So if you change your perspective and decide, like, I mean, I don't want to use the word leech, but the idea of like off-grid hybrid is always, you know, don't be an off-grid hybrid. Don't be an off-grid purist, because to be an off-grid purist, you got to pay a $70,000, hydro like solar system. But you could be a off-grid hybrid, and you could take your Jackery or Bluetti and plug it in at the Tim Hortons while you drank some coffee. I'm just saying, like,
Well,
there's excess is falling towards us in every, and if you just, you downgrade.
don't
And
let
again, I'm not
perfection be
saying
the enemy of progress. Get your Jackery and
absolutely,
step
yeah,
towards your solar panels in 10
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Build a
I'm
game
not
plan
saying any of those things, yeah, but everybody wants it all, and they want it now. And I'm
yesterday.
saying, yeah. And the white pill is that it's all available, it's all doable, and you don't even have to like submit to this the jackboot of the system to get it. If you just change from your starting point, your trajectory 4 degrees, and 4 degrees isn't much down here, but by the time you head in those different directions, you're
Compound
all over the
interest.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wealthy barber. Yeah. He taught us everything we need to know. So I'm going to conclude with my white pill. I, I'm glad. I'm thrilled that you pushed us in this direction because it's a refresher of my base nature is to disregard what's going on. I guess in the attempts to do this, this game or this show, you had to get deep into and it can tear you down. It can be like, whoa, man, like there's just destruction all around you. But that's the name of their game is to like hit those fear buttons. And we get it, evolutionary. If you're ready for anything, our chances of survival is better. So we almost perversely seem to like it. I mean,
We're
I guess.
conditioned. That's how we survived. What's that noise? Oh, it's probably not the lottery man. It's probably a burglar, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. It's the lottery man, obviously.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's how we
exactly.
survive, though, is by being
That's how we
conditioned
survive,
to
right?
be cautious.
Absolutely. So
Well,
but we live in a bubble wrapped time period. So you could argue this is the best time to be like throw caution to the wind and
and I would
and go
also
against our
say,
nature.
like, but even the other side of our world, like, let's say we were, like, we've been the city people, we've been the career driven people, we've been the well dressed, worried about how we're looking when we get into the office that day, look, people, and like we want to go on trips and have fun and party. And like, I just think now more than ever with social media, like, as much as like that looks cool at like first glance, like, ooh, look at that pretty person by that nice building. Okay. But like, you just hear more and more about how vapid these people are, how like, whether if they're on some mood pills or this or that, like, that's not even rewarding, like the other side. You know what I mean? Like, life isn't
Well,
about.
I'm not disagreeing with you in any way, but I'm not even gonna like paint that drastic of a picture.
Because it might be for one
Let's
of them,
just
but
I don't know for sure, but let's just say it is as great as it is. As we think it
as it
is.
looks, as it
Sure,
looks.
it is as it is. I'm gonna just stay there, then go do the 60 hours a week that it
Mm-hmm.
takes to do that. Because greatness comes from like, I mean, if you listen to any of the biographies of these great people, like Elon or any of them going back in the history, like
It's
they
80
slept
hour
at the
weeks.
office. They said, no,
Yeah.
100-hour weeks. Like
Yeah.
they live, eat, breathe. Like
For
I
decades.
don't want any of that. Like the best I can muster, I could probably be a working dynamo
50
six
hours
hours.
for 3
No,
weeks of the year.
60. No, I could do 6 hours 3 times a week. To
Right.
me, that's a fair exchange
It's a good
to
trade-off.
keep. That's a trade-off that I'm willing to trade off to meet my basic necessities of life, and I have no trouble doing that, and I don't get paid a lot.
Well, I hope our viewers have enjoyed our white pill episode as much as you and I have. Next week we'll do our ad read for the WEF. But I enjoyed this one. Who knows what we'll be talking
Yeah,
about next week? But thanks for
no,
listening, everybody.
yeah. You have a great night.
Wow!